You've already clapped for him once. So I've had a lot of fun teaching Joel. When we first started the semester, he was really set on a couple of topics that were pretty controversial, right? And I don't know, he ended up with this homework topic, which I think is great because every year we look at the homework load at CBCS and we think, man, are we killing our students or not? And and so I really do think it's a great topic, and I'm excited for Joel to present it to you. Here are his words. He says, "I would like to thank God, Mr. Wade, my advisors, Miss Bethany, and Mr. Ron Weinbaum, and also my friends, family, teachers, and people along the way who have helped me write my thesis and made it possible." His thesis title, "The Homework Ate My Children, Why Homework is Overrated." I'll set the timer up and then I'll let you know when you can start, okay? And let me introduce our panelists, Miss Denise and Mr. Christian. All right, you can start whenever you're ready.
Happy students comes rushing into rhetoric class with twinkling eyes and radiant faces. They say, "Mr. Wade, I couldn't sleep last night because I was so excited to finally learn rhetoric and do my thesis." Let's face it, that is delusional. This kind of thing might only exist in fairy tales. Well, ideally, students should long for knowledge and understanding, but over the years, this culture of curious thinkers who loves to learn grows dim because of homework. Instead, late at night in the corner of their rooms, exhausted and frustrated students helplessly plow through paper after paper, crying and begging for release from the psychological toll of homework. They imagine numerous things they could have done if homework did not exist, or if they had not even come to school in the first place. Students have been burned out for too long before even reaching their final years of high school and have lost their passion in learning years ago. Schools and every one of us should understand that homework is not really as good as it seems. Now, before going any further, let me explain to you a little bit about homework. Homework begins way back in the first century in ancient Rome. Historians suggest Pliny the Younger would encourage his students to practice rhetoric outside of class as an informal practice of homework. In the more modern era, different historical figures continue to administer homework, whether as punishment for citizens, to assert control over citizens, to produce good factory workers, or to train well-performing students to compete with other countries, such as during the Cold War. Until today, the world has different attitudes towards homework, but the majority have agreed and adopted this practice. The amount of homework students receive varies, ranging from 10 to 20 minutes in countries like Finland or South Korea, up to 10 times the amount in countries like China. Now, to understand the bigger picture, we ought to really understand what really is school and education. Derived from Greek, the root for school is skola, meaning spare time, leisure, rest, and ease. Derived from Latin, education, or educare, translates as to guide and to some extent means to seduce. These definitions express a clear idea that schools are meant to be interesting, to encourage curiosity, while leaving students with an opportunity to rest. Nevertheless, schools today are far from that. This thesis defines homework as any standardized assignment assigned by school teachers intended for students to carry out during non-school hours. This definition is not limited to practice assignments, but also standardized worksheets, projects, and such. However, this definition excludes home study courses, extracurricular activities, and open-ended study. Now, Indonesia's curriculum has had significant changes almost every year and proves to be inconsistent. As a matter of fact, Indonesia's curriculum is ranked 57th out of 65 countries in Program for International Student Assessment. Based on statistics in UNESCO 2013, Indonesia also has the second lowest reading interest, with roughly only 1 in 1,000 people interested in reading. Indonesia still has to improve. When schools successfully implement correct models of learning, they are able to optimize students' potential, the same way they are able to extinguish a child's ambition and cause academic trauma. This is enough reason for schools around the globe to reconsider their homework policies. Schools rarely reform their policies specified on homework. Most schools allow free administration of homework subjective to the teacher's needs. Nonetheless, some of the world's best scoring countries have set strict regulations on homework. For example, every school in Finland limits homework to as little as possible at a maximum of 30 minutes every day and instead encourages their students to read books they find interesting during the holidays, achieving excellent results. In fact, Finnish students are able to outperform America in fields of science and mathematics, remaining as one of the best educational systems in the world until today. On this account, schools should avoid giving homework to students for three reasons. Homework does not utilize time effectively, homework undermines children's quality of life, and homework does not promote learning as desired. So, as first, homework, contrary to popular belief, homework proves to undermine children's quality of life instead of reinforcing it. For one, homework impairs relationships in families. So, in a survey, 1 in every 2 parents reported to have experienced conflict between themselves and their children in the past year that involves crying or yelling because of homework. Exhausted parents arrive home from work and expect to rest, to have quality time with their children, and yet they arrive home just to receive more work in the form of supervising their children's homework. Surely, the role of parents gradually shifts from loving parents into ruthless teachers. The same goes for their responsibilities and role in their child's life. As the ancient Roman philosopher Pliny the Elder once said, home is where the heart is. Home is supposed to be a place where children feel socially, emotionally, and physically safe, not a place where children are continually stressing out over homework and getting yelled at. Second, homework has adverse effects on physical health. After a long day in school with no time to rest, children deserve to rest. And for obvious reasons, more work leads to stress and frustration, especially if students find it difficult. Nancy Yuan, director of Stanford's Children Help Sleep Center, claims that adolescents would rather sacrifice their sleep than having to remove an activity. These adults claim they feel tired without realizing they are sleep deprived. Sleep deprived students cannot concentrate in school, forcing them to stay up late to catch up with lessons and come back to school the next day unprepared to learn. Now, stress and sleep deprivation are often linked with diabetes, hypertension, and also impaired growth, which becomes more common amongst teenagers these days. Now, play and social interaction are equally as important for students, but homework is a nemesis for these two. Homework forces children to isolate themselves in their rooms. It takes time away from children being children, whose job is to socialize and play. So studies in Indian orphanages shows that play and social interaction has significant effects on children's motoric, on children's problem solving, and also on children's creative skills. A range of evidences also shows that play and social interaction helps children develop empathy towards one another to adapt not only to their own wishes, but also to the wishes of other children. Homework alone cannot teach these skills. So a Dutch historian and cultural theorist, Johan Huizinga, coined a Latin term and philosophy, homo ludens, directly translated as man the player. This philosophy suggests that man, by nature, desires to play, and play is impossible to remove. Play is a form of expression by homologies that contributes to a happy and productive society. Depriving children from play, thus, prevents them from being productive in society. It does exactly the opposite of what homework is supposed to do. Now, here and there, we hear parents and teachers say that more homework leads to higher achieving students. They associate achievement with rigor and rigor with the amount of homework children do. People need to realize that homework does not utilize time effectively and may in fact simply waste it. To be clear, research on the benefit on homework is often misleading. Most of these researches uses correlation instead of causation between variables, when actually homework's benefits depends on a huge number of factors, both internal and external. It depends on the kind of homework given, whether questions are fill in the blanks, if it involves calculations or equations, or if it is something else. It depends on the quality, difficulty, and amount of homework, and if the child is interested in the homework, the child's self-efficacy, and whether they receive support or not. However, most researchers generalize all these kind of variables into one, making their research flawed. After confirming his research with a meta-analysis of over 17 studies, Harris Cooper concluded that homework has negligible benefits for high school students and none for elementary school students. So the bottom line is that researches on the benefits on homework mislead society into believing in its exaggerated benefits, even when it is not entirely accurate. Additionally, majority of studies on homework's effects on academic achievement measures academic achievements based on grades and test scores. Grades and tests are usually designed based on questions in homework. Thus, students who do their homework consequently receives higher grades in the test, but not necessarily perform better on different tests. So, do you see the pattern? This is a false representation of academic achievement. Instead of encouraging students to become curious and understand lessons, homework conditions students to become good test takers, to memorize facts or definitions, because it will appear in the test, instead of understanding lessons and thinking critically. It makes sense then why homework typically involving practice or repetition often achieves, quote, the best results. According to Bloom's taxonomy, remembering is the lowest form of cognitive skill and education. To remember means the ability to recall and memorize facts, informations, dates, or terms, or equations. Remembering is then followed by step 2, understanding, step 3, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and ultimately creating. If the purpose of education is as shallow as memorizing things or achieving good grades, then homework is doing an excellent job. Students spend a third of their day at school and another third for sleeping. All they have left is 8 hours for themselves, not yet including the time it takes for a trip from home to school, the time it takes for dinner, for extra course, to sleep, and prepare for the next day. Adding homework becomes too much, especially because the amount of time teachers expect students to complete homework is simply impossible to predict. The same homework may take several minutes for one student, but an hour for another. Because of this, all too often, students justify shortcuts, such as cheating, in order to finish their homework and achieve full marks, making homework pointless. The saying that more homework leads to higher achieving students is then at best a fabled myth if students did not even do their homework. So homework achieves its best results when it is tailored specifically to the differing needs of each student. In spite of that, designing homework of such quality would require too much time from teachers. An effective homework must be assigned with clear purpose. It must not be merely as a routine or busy work. And students must not find it as too difficult nor take too much time. And finally, students should also have a sense of control over this homework and should master the subjects that they are doing in the questions. The last 3 points indicates that homework must be personalized for it to work. Then teachers must give quality feedback for each one and evaluate each student's performance. Linda Cameron and Lee Bartel's research on almost 1,000 teachers in Canada shows that more than half of the teachers responded that homework significantly adds to their workload. Every teacher here knows how dreadful it is to check 50 sheets of homework every night, let alone making it personalized for each student. Most importantly, homework does not promote learning as desired. Homework extinguishes students' love for learning. By design, most homework lacks autonomy, which ends up being very restrictive and repetitive for students. This utilitarian approach in education makes homework feel like a chore, often causing academic burnout. With very limited time, homework pressures students to immediately understand concepts they learn at school without even understanding the purpose behind it. Students are afraid to make mistakes because of the risk and time it takes for trial and error. It reinforces an already defective educational system. Where students must blow through dozens of similar math questions because it will appear in the test, or memorize every single country Christopher Columbus visited without even understanding the purpose behind it. Students are inclined to be curious thinkers, to make sense of the world, to learn something new, and understand things around them. If by any chance they refuse, it means that there is a flaw in the way that schools approach education. Because of this, students also rightfully develop negative attitudes towards school when the goal is actually to promote lifelong learners. Furthermore, extending study through homework causes unintended educational disparity. Homework intends to help students who are left behind to catch up with lessons, but instead leaves these students behind. Because different students have different circumstances that may not be suitable for homework. For example, students in less wealthy families may not have access to the internet, books, or supervisors who can help their children doing homework. Even the child may have to take multiple jobs or take care of the house. Because of this, they may not be able to accomplish the homework. Similarly to those with extra, maybe parents or tutors, the internet or electronics who can aid them in doing homework. Plus, homework also widens the knowledge gap between high-achieving and low-achieving students. Because students who struggle academically may not have proper understanding of lessons when they complete homework, and may instead reinforce misconceptions as they will be less and less interested in academics, leaving them further behind. Finally, time spent on homework could be spent on something else. For the record, homework scope is limited to subjects that reside within the school's curriculum, such as maths or sciences. Learning is not limited to, say, understanding math equations or calculating the speed of a supersonic jet plane. Learning how to play an instrument, learning how to play soccer, or participating in a club are all equal forms of learning that homework alone cannot teach. Homework takes away any time children have left to nurture their passion and hobbies. Children should choose to spend their time on sharpening something they are passionate about, on something permanent, instead of spending all the times they have studying all kinds of lessons that they will forget. Now, some people might claim homework is still necessary as practice for students to further improve their understanding of lessons. Surely, practice is necessary for particular fields of study such as maths, sciences, language, music, or sports. But practice does not have to be carried at home. 8 hours in school every day is more than enough. Without supervision, homework does not encourage students to explore, and teachers cannot guarantee that students will do their homework, nor guarantee that students will gain proper understanding of lessons when they do their homework. After all, kids work more effectively at school where immediate feedback is available rather than at home. Then one might argue, even if homework has barely any educational significance, homework still provides other non-academic benefits such as teaching responsibility, time management, getting parents involved with their children, or diligence, and more. No matter what, everyone can agree that these values are not only found from accomplishing homework. In fact, these values can be found anywhere else more effectively. Being responsible and thus doing homework does not mean homework is the cause for being responsible. It may be reckless to conclude that homework helps students manage their time or become diligent students when they do not even have a choice nor any time to manage. So, we have explored and tried to understand why schools should avoid giving homework to students. Homework is not only inadequate, it impairs relationships as much as it degrades the quality of life children deserve. Homework does not utilize time effectively and fools people to believe in its exaggerated benefit even when it is not entirely accurate. Moreover, homework constrains the definition of learning within school's parameters and extinguishes students' passion, curiosity, and most importantly, love for learning. Though immediate change is not possible, schools can begin by reducing the amount of homework students receive and instead resort to more effective class sessions. Schools can encourage the usage of open-ended practices, unstructured projects, or open tutoring for struggling students, which reinstates the classical education we have lost. Reducing homework isn't some far-fetched fantasy. It is a call for all of us to stop taking our situation for granted. You and I have had a fair share of childhood, of playing with friends, of learning our first instrument, or laying down a couch during a lazy afternoon. But what if all of it is stripped away from the future of our children in exchange for papers, pens, and demands of the school? We should rise as advocates for this matter, to rethink if we have been doing enough for our younger generations. We should instill a policy that makes sense, a policy that is true and has value. Let us make it happen together. Thank you.
Great job, Joel. Let's go ahead and start the Q&A. We will go ahead and start with Mrs. Denise.
Joel, you did a great job. Thank you so much for bringing this topic. So just as an educator and as the head of school, this is a really important topic. And the truth is, I would actually love for you to share this presentation with all of my faculty because I think it's that important. I agree with you on so many places of your presentation. And I really appreciate your research, thinking, looking back at the history of homework, how it's developed, how it's used, and questioning what the purpose is. And so I really love that you brought this topic.
Thank you.
So thanks. Yeah, so I do have a few questions for you to help me clarify, because I think you're bringing an important topic up, but what does it look like in practice? And what are some really practical things we can do to change things? Or maybe you can elaborate a little more on your position, because it sounded like from your speech, that you're sort of advocating no homework, like all homework is evil, right? It's kind of like an either or. Homework's evil, it's not good, it's misunderstood, it's misapplied, it's misused, and it's killing everyone's love for learning. So I'm wanting to ask, are you really advocating for zero homework or limited homework or a different kind of homework? You know what I'm saying? Because you kind of touched on those three things within your speech. So help me understand a little more what you're really promoting.
So thank you for asking, and I'm sorry if it's a bit unclear. So basically, this thesis, I would like to say that not all homework is bad, because we can understand that usually if teachers have personalized one-to-one tutoring with their children, they will also give them homework that actually helps the children itself. And we should also understand that not all homework is actually bad for students, because homework actually is still necessary for practice, for example, for several subjects. However, what I'm advocating for is more to that the way that the world approaches homework today is very utilitarian. It's similar to the way that Industrial Revolution, schools would administer homework as means for students to become good factory workers, to with this some kind of goal, which is to achieve work, which in that time is only limited to factories. Um, well, this thesis intends to like say that we should avoid this type of homework and instead move to a better type of homework and regulate it.
Right. Okay. So that's clear for me. So you're really saying we need to reconsider the purpose of homework and especially maybe have a paradigm shift in our thinking of why we give homework and how we give homework and what we're trying to accomplish with homework, right? So I would agree with that 100%. So one of the things that I want to kind of come back to is you said something, I think it was Pliny, that mentioned that man desires to play by nature. Was that Pliny or someone else?
That's Johann Huizinga.
Ah, okay. So he mentioned that man desires to play by nature, which I would agree with. And so then you touched on this idea of homework being a tool that can be used to help develop responsibility, perhaps time management. Because let's face it, as an employee, my job as head of school doesn't end at 3:45. Sometimes I have homework, right? There's things that I need to get done because in my day I was unable to accomplish certain things, and there is a deadline looming and it needs to happen. So I think the idea of taking something outside of your work hours, and for a student, school hours or your work hours, is not necessarily something that is evil, and it's definitely something that's going to happen in life. So how would you speak to that in terms of, isn't there a reason and a purpose for us to work on time management, and our hearts by nature desire to play, and we may not want to do the things we should do?
Yeah, okay. So thank you for asking. So I believe that there could also be cases where instead of doing something productive, the students end up being lazy in their houses and doing nothing. But I would like to point out the fact that I believe every one of us here has at least like something that we are interested in. And we will actually try to find ways to develop this passion. For example, I don't know, for example, Nicholas here is interested in programming. Then he might spend his free time studying about programming or like finding facts about programming and etc. And also, we can see this from how usually since babies are born, they are actually interested to find ways to discover around
Yeah.
about the world and everything around them.
Right. They're
But-
exploring.
yeah,
Correct.
but over the years, we can see that students get more and more lazy. And I believe one of the factors could also be because of the world, because of how schools are designed, because of how teachers teach, and because of burnout and etc.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's good. So then back to this idea of then if we were to make a shift, we would need to perhaps utilize the classroom more effectively, right? And so instead of saying, as a teacher, I'm going to lecture for 45 minutes and then you go do the homework at home, right? You're saying that's not a good system. But let's also face it, 45 minutes, it's a short time period. So how are you going to be able to accomplish meaningful instruction and have time to practice without having homework? That's what a teacher would ask. What do you think?
So first of all, I would like to clarify that I'm not advocating that schools should not give homework at all, but instead shift it into a more. So what we avoid is the type of homework that we are generally accustomed with, and instead try to design more meaningful homework and regulate the time for.
Got it. I see what you're saying. So it's really about the paradigm shift of how we assign homework and what kind of homework we assign. Yeah. And maybe I caught something from your speech that I loved, and I thought, man, I want to ask my teachers this. Are we designing homework to be playful? Are we designing homework that promotes curiosity and creativity? Or are we designing homework that is to develop the right answer so that I can stick a grade in the grade book. Right? I think that's kind of your premise, right? Let's don't do that kind, because that's the lowest level of information is just fact recall. And we want to develop things higher in Bloom's taxonomy. And I think you're right. More intentional homework could promote that, and we could rethink how we're assigning it. So thanks for bringing this topic. I'm going to pass it to Christian.
Great job, Joel. Thank you for your thesis. I see you have poured a lot of passion in both your writing and your speech. Your overall arguments, history, and everything else is quite sound and quite thorough. So I guess it's kind of ironic that I'm here as your panelist, because I guess my students can attest just how difficult my homework can be for those in 11th grade and 12th grade, you know? Yeah, so, but to concur, I do agree. I do think about it sometimes that it is a little bit more tougher. But I guess it's we can talk about that in a bit. First, I want to go for just a few basic questions for now. So, you have a contrast of schools from many other places. For example, China, America, and Finland, which is, we can, I guess, agree that Finland is probably the best ideal case. Although, unfortunately, the world hasn't really tried to imitate or even get close to Finland's standards, right? But what about Chaya Bangsa? How do you think the workload of Chaya Bangsa compares to maybe at least just locally, compared to maybe local schools, sekolah negeri, and so on? Yeah.
Okay, thank you for asking. So, I'm not very aware with the national students' workload. However, I have heard several stories from them, and they said that before a change in the curriculum, with the curriculum 2013, if I'm not mistaken, students actually receive huge amounts of workload, but then it's not that much. Usually, it's on average, it's about 2 to 3 hours, or on like the peaks, it's like usually 2 to 3 hours. On general, every day it's above 1 hour. In CBCS alone, I have not sent a formal form for like conducting research on the entire SOR. However, I have asked like multiple of my peers, for like about 10 to 15 of my peers, and thankfully on 12th grade, the amount of workload students receive has declined, especially because we need to focus more on thesis. But from previous years, there have been huge complaints about homework, because actually students could spend like ranging from 2 up to 5 hours or 6 hours on homework for like struggling students. But on general, it's like about 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours every day.
And that's last year. So
Last year, yeah.
What's the estimate for this year, if in comparison? If do you have any information about that?
This year, personally, I believe it's on average before the thesis, because after the thesis, lessons have been slowed down. But before the thesis, I believe it's about 1 to 2 hours every day.
For grade 12, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we don't, the other grades, it would be.
For me, though,
right.
because for different students, it might
Right.
take longer.
I like that you're saying that there's different kinds of students. Sorry, I'm jumping in. There's different kinds of students. And so, like you said, that's hard to gauge. And so you have to kind of target your middle of the road student when you're a teacher assigning homework. And you know it might take shorter for some, longer for others. Go ahead.
Mr. Christian has the floor.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for your answer, and thank you for being transparent with your claims. Okay. So yeah, we also, as teachers, we also have been struggling to maintain the balance between it, because some of us do give homework for a certain purpose. I guess for my case, even though it is difficult, yes, we can agree, right? It's actually, for my case, a way to prepare students for future difficult projects they might encounter in college terms, because in that case you might not even have the teacher supporting you. In that case, they might just say, okay, do this project, and then nothing, no info, and if you ask, you might even get talked back or yelled at, like that. So in my case, it's like, okay, it's the homework designed so that the students can adapt, connect the dots between different concepts, different principles, and apply it to actual usage and actual, let's say, products or machinery and so on. Okay, but I guess that's just trying to, well, make it sound better, doesn't it?
I think you're justifying.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
No, but I think that's a valid point, Christian, if I can add to that, that there is this desire for teachers, and teachers want what's best for students. I mean, we're not out, no, I don't know of any teacher that's like, how can I make my students miserable? You know, nobody's doing that. And like you said, teachers don't want to have, maybe some, I don't know. But I think, Joel, that teachers are in general wanting to prepare you for the future. And so especially in high school, they're looking at what is the information and the study habits and the study skills you're going to need to be able to be successful at the next level and in life, right? And so how would you address that? How would you speak to that?
Okay, thank you for asking. So I do believe that practice is still necessary for example, for physics, because students need to get used to calculating things. However, I believe that the amount of homework that students receive is still excessive. And I have also interviewed personally several students specifically for physics homework, and they believe that the homework actually does not really help them a lot in regards to understanding the lessons. Although for those interested in physics particularly, it might appeal more interesting for them. However, for students who will not pursue anything related to physics, they believe that it's very excessive, and instead it makes them want to drop out from the physics class. And wait, can you repeat a little bit about your question before?
Yeah, so I guess what I'm really saying is I think it might be interesting to continue research on this topic, because I think you've got a really important topic. And I think it would be fascinating for us, and what I'd like to see you do, even though this isn't your thesis anymore, I would love any committee of students that want to do this. I want to take a survey of alumni, and I want to ask alumni, what was your homework load? What was effective? What was not effective about it? And did it prepare you for university or not? Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Because I think what Mr. Christian's saying is he feels an obligation to make sure you're ready to handle what you're going to face at the university level, even if it's not physics specifically, right? How is university structured and the load that you need to manage, right? So yeah, so I'm just saying, how would you speak to that?
So before that, I would like to point out that usually college examine applicants through not only through not only their grades, but also their CV, through an exam, and through extracurricular activities or other things that they do outside of school. So I believe if they spend their time instead on the specific majors that they are passionate about, they could develop and get more prepared for the college that they are investing in. And additionally, I have also heard that in college, from like several alumni, that in college, the professors usually encourage their students to be more independent, to learn independently. And most of the alumni say that they actually do not receive as much homework from college compared to schools, because teachers expect their students to learn. And in a sense, homework kind of spoon feeds students into what they should learn. If students are trained to think for themselves of what they should learn for a test and get used to an independent study, they would instead probably get more prepared for college.
Okay. If I might ask about your statement last time. So you just mentioned about how alumni are saying there's not much homework in the college setting, right? What kind of majors are they, if we may know? Because personally, I went through an engineering degree, both from a diploma side or polytechnic and from a general bachelor side. And both of them basically means that you don't have a life. Yeah. I have multiple cases where I had to basically abandon all kinds of entertainment, if any, for several weeks or maybe several months, just in order to yeah, survive and finish some projects that were given. And plus, with no help from the teacher or the professor at all, because they don't want to. So, what majors can apply to that kind of claim?
Okay, so thank you for asking, and I'm sorry for that. So the particular majors that I have asked is one of them is from mathematics major, and the other one is from chemistry. But then those are from national schools, so I'm not quite aware of other schools in other countries.
Okay, technically, I also went to national schools. So,
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the standards are much harder, right? For a reason, you know. But I guess let's just continue with a few other questions. Perhaps let's go to a more positive one. So, you're not advocating for homework to be abolished, or maybe you're advocating for better forms. Now, peculiarly, we do actually have quite an interesting form here in Chayabangsa. Maybe if I were to accredit Mr. Anthony's history class, he set up a homework system where students are encouraged to play a certain game based on the time period they're learning, right? And that counts as a homework. They have to reach certain milestones and so on in order to fulfill that homework. Do you think that's actually an ideal or a better case of set homework?
Okay, thank you for asking. And yes, I do believe actually that those type of homework are actually very beneficial for students. And I have also interviewed several of my friends, actually a lot of my friends, and they are very enthusiastic about this type of homework. They are very interested in doing it, and they actually learn something from it. However, I would not consider this type of assignments as homework because it's more of a leisure instead of something that they are supposed to do. And as my thesis defines, homework is it's like the way schools are accustomed to assign homework today, which mostly are standardized.
So we're almost out of time. I need to ask one question to close with, and that is some of the teachers would say that, yeah, we give them time in class, but there's some students who, are playing around, and I'm not going to mention names, but they might say, I would rather do this at home anyway.
Because
right?
man desires to play by
Yeah.
nature. That's what I was trying to talk about earlier. Yeah.
So how do you comment on that?
Okay, so I believe that definitely some students will still want to play around in class, but there could be several factors that leads to this, which could be from how they are accustomed to learning and how they already feel burnt out from school. However, I believe also it lies in the responsibility of teachers to track their students to make sure that they are doing their assignments. And teachers can actually give like some solutions such as making due dates for this. Like for example, you should finish this at the end of the class or stuff. And actually what is good from doing it at school is that teachers can actually accompany their children in doing homework and give constant feedback. And students too are not afraid to make mistakes or ask questions. Yeah. While instead, if they are at home, they might actually not do it at all because lazy students will be lazy students no matter what.
No, I think that's a good point. Can I do one more thing? Can I ask one more thing? I just want to add one more. One thing that you mentioned in your speech is the definition of the word skole, right? And skole means leisure. And your argument was that learning should be a leisurely process. But I would also like to address the time period. I believe that in that context, in the Greco-Roman time period, leisure meant that you were someone of wealth. Yeah. You weren't a laborer out in the fields planting gardens and picking the rice, right? You were somebody that had access to education because you had the time, because you weren't just trying to earn your daily bread. Does that make sense? So I think you want to be careful when you think about how we apply the word leisure. It doesn't mean that it's like, oh, I'm just swinging on a hammock and enjoying a book, right? It means you have space in your life because of the wealth of your parents and your social economic status, be able to have time to think about conceptual ideas. Does that make sense? Yeah, so just know that that's a little feedback.
Okay, the microphones have been silenced. Good job. Good job, Joel. You completed it. Did a great job. So I guess we can be a little bit more leisurely in our time, but friends and family can meet up here for photos behind the backdrop.